Chapter 3 of The Adventures of Peter Cottontail. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. This has been read by Rosalind Carlyle. The Adventures of Peter Cottontail by Thornton W. Burgess. Chapter 3. There's Nothing Like the Old Name After All. Bobby Coon and Jimmy Skunk had their heads together. Now, when these two put their heads together, you may make up your mind that they are planning mischief. Yes, sir, there is sure to be mischief afoot when Bobby Coon and Jimmy Skunk put their heads together as they were doing now. Had Peter Rabbit seen them, he might not have felt so easy in his mind as he did. But Peter didn't see them. He was too much taken up with trying to look as important as his new name sounded. He was putting on airs and holding his head very high as he went down to the Smiling Pool to call on Jerry Muskrat. Whenever anyone called him by his old name, Peter pretended not to hear. He pretended that he had never heard that name and didn't know that he was being spoken to. Bobby Coon and Jimmy Skunk thought it a great joke, and they made up their minds that they would have some fun with Peter, and perhaps make him see how very foolish he was. Yes, sir, they planned to teach Peter a lesson. Bobby Coon hurried away to find Reddy Fox and tell him that Peter had gone down to the Smiling Pool, and that if he hid beside the path, he might catch Peter on the way back. Jimmy Skunk hunted up Blacky the Crow and Sammy Jay and told them of his plan and what he wanted them to do to help. Of course, they promised that they would. Then he went to Ol' Mistah Buzzard and told him. Ol' Mistah Buzzard grinned and promised that he would do his share. Then Bobby Coon and Jimmy Skunk hid where they could see all that would happen. Peter had reached the Smiling Pool, and now sat on the bank admiring his own reflection in the water and talking to Jerry Muskrat. He had just told Jerry that when his old name was called out he didn't hear it any more, when along came Blacky the Crow.
"Hello, Peter Rabbit. You're just the fellow I'm looking for. I've a very important message for you,"
shouted Blacky. Peter kept right on talking with Jerry Muskrat, just as if he didn't hear, although he was burning with curiosity to know what the message was.
"I say, Peter Rabbit, are you deaf?"
shouted Blacky the Crow. Jerry Muskrat looked up at Blacky and winked. "Oh, Peter Rabbit isn't here," said he. "This is Peter Cottontail."
"Oh," said Blacky, "my message is for Peter Rabbit, and it's something he really ought to know. I'm sorry he isn't here."
And with that, away flew Blacky the Crow, chuckling to himself. Peter looked quite as uncomfortable as he felt, but of course he couldn't say a word after boasting that he didn't hear people who called him Peter Rabbit. Pretty soon along came Sammy Jay. Sammy seemed very much excited. "Oh, Peter Rabbit, I'm so glad I've found you!" he cried. "I've some very important news for you." Peter had all he could do to sit still and pretend not to hear, but he did. "Oh, this is Peter Cottontail," said Jerry Muskrat, winking at Sammy Jay.
"Ah," replied Sammy, "my news is for Peter Rabbit."
And off he flew, chuckling to himself. Peter looked and felt more uncomfortable than ever. He bade Jerry Muskrat good-bye and started for the dear Old Briar-patch to think things over. When he was halfway there, old Mistah Buzzard came sailing down out of the sky. "Brer Cottontail," said he, "if yo' see anything of Brer Rabbit, yo' tell him that Brer Fox am hiding behind that big bunch of grass just ahead." Peter stopped short, and his heart gave a great leap. There, behind the clump of grass, was something red, sure enough. Peter did not wait to see more. He started for a hiding place he knew of in the Green Forest as fast as he could go, and behind him raced Reddy Fox. As he ran, he heard Blacky the Crow and Sammy Jay laughing, and then he knew that this was the news that they had for him. I guess that Peter Rabbit is a good enough name after all," he panted. End of chapter 3.